So it is May Day, though, however, and it is International Workers' Rights Day. We got to talk to, we have on the line with us a good friend of the program and an awesome independent alternative media journalist, a good friend of the show, Mark Taylor-Canfield. Mark, can you hear me, man?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear, bud. Thanks so much for making it.
Great.
Yeah, Mark, for the people who don't know or haven't heard you before, tell us who all. I mean, you do so much, Mark. You're on Pacifica Radio. You're writing for free speech, all sorts of things. Tell folks what you do.
Well, today I'm reporting for Free Speech Radio News on the Pacifica Network, and also some other members of the Media Consortium, which is a group that includes Mother Jones and Free Speech TV and all sorts of folks. An alternative media network. But I'm reporting on May Day today, and I've also done a lot of media appearances myself as a journalist about the whole situation here in Seattle, because I've been covering it for the last year. And although last year I was actually an organizer for Occupy Seattle, at least I was a member of their Occupy Seattle Media Working Group, this year I am pretty much being introduced on all the media programs on local TV here and on the Tom Hartman Show and places like that as an independent journalist, writing for Huffington Post. I write at Daily Kos, Op-Ed News, Truth Out. I have a piece at Counterpunch, another one at Seattle Times. So wherever I can, I'm freelancing most of the time, but my steady gig is usually with Free Speech Radio News. I'm sort of their Seattle stringer. So anything that's happening in my area or of the country, or even in British Columbia, Canada, that area, I end up covering for them. So that's sort of I'm an activist and musician and all sorts of other things. But over the last year or so, I've really focused on journalism. So that's what I'm doing. I specialize in covering the Occupy Wall Street movement. And actually have a book that's already written and I'm trying to get published at the moment about my experiences with that whole movement. So that's where I'm coming from, Jacob. But glad to hear you on the air for sure. I'm glad that you're talking about May Day because it's an important subject. And it, by the way, is getting a lot of local coverage here in Seattle. I've been monitoring all sorts of things. The Seattle Police Twitter account and the local news media is all reporting about immigrants' rights issues and workers' rights this year instead of broken windows and anarchists. Although, well, that's not true. There's actually a lot of talk about anarchists, but
right.
Yeah, it's refreshing, to see corporate media actually address the real issue of what May Day is about instead of sort of other side issues that came up last year, which, as you know, and other folks who've heard me on Filter Free Radio and Tom Hartman Show and other places, there was a Seattle federal grand jury which ended up jailing 4 activists, put them a couple of them in solitary confinement for up to 5 months, and also, that was what I would consider sort of a political response to the property damage last year at a federal appeals court and at local downtown corporate businesses here in Seattle on May Day. So there was also an independent review of police activity on May Day of last year.
Right.
And that was a report that was written by a former assistant police chief for the Los Angeles Police Department, and it was very critical of the Seattle Police Department, saying that, quote, they had lost their credibility, they damaged their reputation in the community because of their inaction last year during May Day. Also, there was an internal Seattle Police Department report that was just recently, in the last week or so, released after it had been requested a year ago by the Seattle City Council. So the Seattle City Council is not happy with the police department. They called them out several times at local meetings and city council meetings, and our police chief, John Diaz, actually resigned as of 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, under pressure. 30 some odd people were arrested last year during a sit-in outside the mayor's office demanding the police chief's resignation, and that came after the police shooting of a homeless woodcarver here named Native American woodcarver named John T. Williams. And it was also after an 18-month Department of Justice investigation into the Seattle Police Department, which found that they had a, quote, practice and policy of the use of excessive force. So lots of controversy in Seattle, and gotten me a lot of work as a journalist. And today on May Day, there are cameras everywhere and news media everywhere trying to cover the story, trying to, figure out what's the deal with all these anarchists hanging out in downtown Seattle all hoodied up. And there's a clown contingent that started rallying earlier today at Westlake Center around 10 a.m. actually, and they've been riding around town on bicycles. And so the latest story is that there were one march has already gotten to the federal building, and it's the El Comité, which is a long-standing immigrants' rights group here in Seattle. And they've been marching for about 20 years. Juan Bocanegra is one of the organizers there, and they are at this federal building now. There's thousands of people there. The sort of humorous story in a way, I guess, Jacob, is that, well, first of all, last year during the May Day demonstrations, Phoenix Jones ended up staging himself with his other superhero friends. I don't know if your audience knows who he is, but
we've talked about him several times. Yeah.
Well, they staged themselves at the Federal Appeals Court last year trying to protect the place. Well, this year they have been sort of following the marchers around, and I guess there was a confrontation earlier today with a contingent of anarchist clowns. And so the humorous headline, because evidently nobody got seriously injured or anything, but the headline was, clowns versus superheroes in downtown Seattle. So that's what the media has been reporting. It's kind of surreal.
Interesting. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, you got press coverage, That's something.
Well, it's an interesting story, let's put it that way. But what's happening now is that there's another march of, Como Radio, which is our only 24-hour news service here in Seattle, in terms of radio or broadcast media. They are reporting that there's another march that's gathering at Seattle Central Community College, which was, let's put it this way, the first gathering today happened at the original encampment for Occupy Seattle at Westlake Park. After people were arrested and evicted from that park, they went to Seattle Central Community College, and so there's a second gathering happening there. And the Como Radio is describing that gathering as, quote, anarchists. So whatever that word means to the media, they are reporting, and we've all seen the hoodied up folks that are hanging out in downtown Seattle today, and they are telling the media and other people that they've done that because of police harassment, and that they don't want to be targeted by police later after the protests. And in line with that, there have been many reports of FBI visiting and questioning activists in the Seattle area over, and Olympia at Media Island. Actually, they went to which is sort of their version of the Independent Media Center in Olympia. They got a visit from the FBI the other day. So the FBI has been active. There was a lot of pressure by the business community to keep the windows from being broken this year. So there's been police staged out in front of all the downtown local corporate businesses since yesterday, actually. The police presence began 24 hours beforehand, and it's continued today. There's a huge police presence in downtown Seattle. It looks like every police officer that's available is down there.
Mark, if I can, on that note, let me mention, this morning I went down to Terry Shrunk Plaza, which is right in front of City Hall, the City Hall building here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm showing right now on the video some of the footage. But it wasn't the main organized event that's taking place on May Day in Portland, but this was a pre-event, and there were at least 3 large federal Homeland Security police SUVs parked right outside of the event, monitoring all of the, dozen, maybe 2 dozen at the most people who were there at the time this morning. This was around probably between 11 a.m. and 12, and I was down there. I shot some video footage of it, and I talked to a couple of folks and was kind of gathering, kind of getting a sense of what was going on this morning. Again, the main march and rally here in Portland was later on. This was before that, and of course we were on the air at that time. But there was actually, my takeaway was there was obviously more police and even these federal Homeland Security agents there, and I got the footage of it. I've got a couple of pictures that I can show you on the video footage there of these guys that were watching what was going on. There was no instance whatsoever. There was no violence. There was no confrontations. There was no arresting. There wasn't even really any yelling or any name calling, anything going on. It was just a few folks, talking about. I was talking with a couple of people. They didn't even know anything was going on. They just happened to be walking by and saw some folks grouped there in Terry Shrunk Plaza in Portland. And came over to check out what was going on. And, of course, I was concerned. My concern was this morning was following last year's events and everything in Portland and in Seattle and kind of the last year, like you talked about in that article last week in the Seattle Weekly, Mark, facing the kind of damage that came from last year's events and the vandalism and the violence and those rare instances that kind of don't obviously speak for the whole movement, don't speak for the thousands of peaceful, nonviolent people who are out there trying to do right and follow the moral high ground. I wanted to ask you, what is your take? Because this morning, at least while I was there, it was completely nonviolent, absolutely peaceful. And I was curious, Mark, what do you think? What's your takeaway so far on what's Seattle like? I mean, has it been mostly peaceful, or are these few instances of vandalism you think going to dominate the news and then dominate the conversation, and then ultimately dominate the next year of coverage, and then until next year on May Day? What do you think, Mark? I'm curious.
Well, at this point, what I'm finding is that what I was surprised about was actually statements that had been made by some of the protesters at Westlake Center earlier today, and there is a contingent of people taking part in this May Day series of events who, although they said themselves that, according to Como Radio again, who said to themselves that they, or said to these reporters that they, or at least one woman said she was not going to, or she had no plans of smashing anything today was her phraseology, but that she didn't necessarily judge people who did. So you have that sentiment out on the street right now, and I don't know what's going on in terms of the clown anarchist group and Phoenix Jones, but they've already had a confrontation or two. A recent report, I'm trying to follow the Twitter feeds and things. I'm actually in a quiet place nearby because I'm trying not to disturb the phone call, but there was a...
You sound great, by the way. Thank you for... and thanks for giving us a couple minutes. We appreciate it.
Well, yeah, I just had to download Skype, so it took me a little while. Otherwise, I would have called you earlier. But what happened is that the reports were from the clown anarchists that one of their bicycles were run over by a police motorcycle, and they showed the fender to the reporters, and it was all bent up. So that's one of the latest reports. But what's happening now is interesting, in answer to your question, and that is that we've already seen the clown group, which started their activity earlier in the day, and they are pranksters, they're definitely pranksters. And then there's also the El Comité March, which includes, thousands of people, and they're down at the federal building right now. And what that's about is, immigrants' rights. So they're very tight on security. They're very concerned about being infiltrated and with potential, I guess you would call them agitators, right? So they have very serious parade and rally security. So that, is a very secure march. They have applied for a permit. The march that's going to take place soon here at Seattle Central Community College is not permitted. And I don't mean that in saying that, it's not allowed, because the police have already said, the police captain in charge of today's events, who's going to take any kind of heat if anything goes wrong today, he said that, along with the mayor, Mike McGinn, said that Seattle, the city, supports the right of people to express their freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. So they are going to allow any marches to happen today that don't have a permit. Now, the reason I mention that is because at other times in the history of Seattle and also in other cities around the country, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes they just block the street and they start arresting people. Well, they're not going to do that today. They said they will allow people to march, and that is a tradition in Seattle ever since probably the WTO demonstrations or earlier in that. People take to the streets here. The 1-year anniversary of the WTO demonstrations, the city denied the marchers a permit, and I happen to be one of the leaders of those events. And I don't mean that in a hierarchical way, but in the fact that I was helping organize. So all of a sudden, we were told that there would be no permit and that no one would be allowed to march. Well, I marched downtown with about 5,000 people, and there was nothing that anybody could do about it. And ever since then, there's been a tradition that, if it's a controversial march like a police brutality, anti-police brutality march, or, there is controversy in the community over people's rights, then they're going to allow you to march here. I did notice that after the Justice Department came down on them and other folks, like Durley Rainey got pepper sprayed, an 85-year-old woman ended up on Keith Olbermann's show on NBC and became an international star. And that kind of stopped a lot of what was happening at the protests. But there were some protests after that where people took to the streets and the police just didn't even follow, or they were blocks and blocks away. So there's that. And there is an indication, according to the report from the former assistant police chief at LAPD and also local news coverage and, eyewitnesses, that there was a lack of, let's say, or at least what the report would say, that there was a conflict in the orders that were given to the police last year about how to handle the protesters. But one caveat that everyone should know about and no one talks about in Seattle, which is kind of a dirty secret, the police guild has been working in this city for 2 years without a contract. There has been a labor dispute between the city and the police department for 2 years, and it's not even really being mentioned in any of these negotiations with the Justice Department over reforms or, arguments with civil rights groups, which have basically walked away from the whole reform process that the mayor and the police department are now supporting. They're saying that it's bogus. So, let's just say that if the police guild decides, that their hands have been slapped and that they don't want to get in any more trouble, it's possible that they might just kind of stand back and let things happen and say, see, this is what happens when you try to tie our hands. It's also happened in the past when there were demands for a civilian police review board and civil rights reforms. They just refused to agree to a contract that would include those sections. So I'm not saying, as they say in New York City, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, okay?
I'm just saying. Mark, you are the best. And again, I want to thank you so much for a couple minutes of your time on May Day. It is May 1st, 2013. And lots going on up where you are in Seattle and going on here as we speak here in Portland and around the world, because it is, also International workers' rights. It's a day to celebrate and honor and fight for those rights. Maybe a little bit of irony there on the part of the police not having anyways. We only have a couple minutes left in the show, and I want to ask you, Mark, what do you think your takeaway on what is the most important kind of aspect of May Day, or your kind of final thoughts that you want to leave people with, and your take-home message, and what do you see to kind of hope to come out of this May Day this year, 2013?
I have a question for you. Is this going to be posted on your website, this broadcast?
Yeah, we usually do. We can edit it out if you prefer, whatever you.
And YouTube.
No, I just want to hear it because I'm on Skype and it's a weird experience. I usually listen to you guys over the web, but I just wanted to say it is about workers' rights. It's about immigrants' rights, especially in this country. And I really should say this, that a majority of the people who are out on the streets today are actually in Seattle, are out there because of labor unions who have organized and recruited their members to get out there and represent the working person in this country, which is very important if you think about what's been going on with the economy and the dismantling of labor union power across the country. There's a also, this is happening all over the world, but I have a couple of reports about local regional things. In Olympia, there was a major May Day protest, which is still happening at Sylvester Park, and they did sit down in the street at one point and block traffic, and there was a threat of arrest there. There were arrests documented in New York City, and you can go to Eye on the Ground, which is a live stream. Just go to Eye on the Ground, that's EYE. And you'll see some video that's being posted of that. And then also in Los Angeles, actually, people go to my Twitter feed, MT Canfield. You'll find a post also from Occupy LA of what's happening down there today. So I just wanted to let folks know, that there are things going on all over the country. And, a lot of these stories don't normally get told in the media, or at least the context of, what they're really about doesn't get explained to people. So I'm glad to have this opportunity. And, Seattle has, just because of all the controversy over last day's May Day, this year is really important in terms of the police are trying to set a good example on crowd control so that they don't get in any more trouble.
Right.
The city politically needs to do that. The federal government needs to protect their properties, so they're involved in trying to, they were also involved in the federal grand jury as a political backlash to what happened last year. So my take on this has always been, and all my media appearances has been, I hope that we're not still talking 12 months from now about broken windows, because the real issues of what May Day is about get lost. And in the United States, it's become less of a day for workers' rights and more of just a day off from work and shopping mall sales. So, and that, there's a reason that Labor Day is not on May 1st in the United States of America. So think about that. In the United States, it's not really very much of a radical day, but there are people around the country today who feel very strongly that it's a day to stand up for working people and basically get out in the streets and be vocal.
Mark, you're the best, man. Keep up the good work. Mark Taylor-Canfield, find him on Twitter at MTCanfield. On Facebook, he's a contributor to Huffington Post and the Daily Kos and all sorts of good stuff. Mark, real independent journalism, we need it so much, and thank you for everything that you're doing and telling it like it is, buddy. So anytime.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, and by the way, the Skype audio is immaculate. You sound fantastic, Mark, and we'll get this posted so you can check it out. Everyone can check it out at our website at filterfreeradio.com and share the links around and everything. So, Mark, thanks again, bud, and keep up the good work, and happy May Day, buddy.
Thanks for letting me go on for so long, and also support Free Speech Radio News. They really need people's help right now. And also, let's give a shout-out to Tom Hartman and Free Speech TV, which is also having their fund drive. Tom put me on earlier today to give a live report, so I really appreciate his help. So shout-out to everybody out there listening, and I hope to be on again soon so I can, fill people in on underreported news stories. And in the meantime, happy May Day.
There we go. Happy May Day, Mark.
Amen.
Thanks again, buddy, and we'll talk to you soon. On that note, we are totally out of time. Matter of fact, we've gone a little bit long, but I wasn't about to cut Mark short. So on that note, unfortunately, got to cut myself short. Scott, you got 10 seconds. Final thoughts, man. What's the tip?
Just amen to what Mark was saying. It's important to be aware of what's going on and to get out and get active and agitate.
There we go. Thank you so much to Scott, our super duper awesome mass producer, co-host, kick-ass all-around good guy there in Washington, D.C. Big thanks to Mark Taylor-Canfield, special guest there for the last portion of the program. And it ended so much better than it started. So thank you for hanging in there with us on this May Day 2013. Special thanks to Nicole Sandler, RadioNaut.com, and DJ Downtown at ProgressiveBlendRadio.com for syndicating this program. Also, Kenny Pick of Liberal Justice Radio for syndicating the program. And a big thanks to Dano at danosongs.com and Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com, and also the Roybert at CrownRecords.com. Good friend, the Roybert, for music production. I want to thank everyone in the chat room. Thank you. And also, I want to thank Jesse, the concerned citizen from Portland, who organized the rally that I attended this morning in Portland at May Day down there at Terry Shrunk. Thank you to everyone who showed up, and thank you for being a part of the solution more than we are a part of the problem. We'll see you on Monday. Have a good one, everybody. Get out there, get active. Peace, love, nonviolence, filterfreeradio.com. We'll see you on Monday.
Filter Free Radio.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart.